All right, well, the sun just went down, but I thought we would do 2024 year in review, I guess. It's not quite yet the end of the year, but we've been doing these since we got here. And it's always good. It's nice for us because then we could always watch the video and remember what we did in that year, what our accomplishments. And we'll do another video of a look ahead for 2025 and what is on our plans. And oftentimes when we do these, we say what we've accomplished, but they may not be everything that we wanted to accomplish. So at the end of 2023, we'll be like, hey, we wanted to accomplish this in 2024, and it may not have been that way. So I guess I'll ask you, what do you think was the hardest project that we did in 2024?
The barn.
The barn?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it was just a lot of it and hard labor while it was like really hot.
Yeah. We didn't plan
And
on
high
doing
up.
it during the hottest parts of the year, but it ended up being that way.
Yeah, we planned it to be done right before the hottest part of the year, but sometimes a project takes longer than you think it does, and then
Best laid plans, but the barn was definitely on our agenda for 2024, and it's not like entirely complete, but our main concern was basically getting the exterior, new doors, that type of stuff. You want to talk any more about it?
yeah, I mean, it was just an eyesore. And the part that my wood shop was in, it had zip sheeting on it, which is like a weather or waterproof barrier kind of thing. But it's not really meant to be facing outside. It's meant to have siding on it,
Right.
or in front of it.
At least for extended period of time.
Yeah, because the
over a
UV
year.
and the rain and the snow will damage it. It's really just to catch like whatever gets behind the siding.
Mm-hmm.
So having that exposed for 1.5 years is not great. The warranty on it is 6 months. You can leave it exposed. So we need to get that closed in, and then yeah, just all the doors and windows. I don't know. It was just an eyesore. It's good that we can look at it now and it looks a lot better.
Yeah, Sandra put in a lot of work in it, and we've done a couple videos on the barn, basically how much we saved by doing a lot of the labor ourselves, and also just the barn from soup to nuts, kind of what we ended up working on it. So there's still more to do, and I think that will be a project that will carry on until 2025. One thing that I almost forgot about that it happened this year, because it was 8 months ago, is that we basically successfully demoed what we needed to demo behind us in the common house.
Yeah, the whole year got started with this house back here.
It was off to a good
And
start.
It was off to a great start. I
Yeah.
got a lot in, I got a lot figured out, demoed everything, and essentially at that point, like, we have half of the plumbing is done. Like, all the main plumbing is done in the utility room. The rest of the plumbing that still needs to happen is like running some water lines here and there and some drain lines. I basically had to take on a project for work, so I was out for a couple months, and that basically stopped the project. And
I think most people could empathize with
then
that.
it was so nice outside that we decided to start on the barn because we
Yeah.
like to get it done before it got really hot. And then we realized how much work it was going to be, and then it just took a lot longer. And
Although part of that warm weather was also the deck. That's another thing that you finished this past year. Or not finished, but it's like 95% finished on this
I don't
common
work
house.
any on the deck this year. That was last year.
That was last year?
Yeah, end of last year I finished it.
Oh, okay. I guess what I'm thinking about is like your mom was putting in some of those little
Yeah,
plugs.
so my
and-
parents came over here.
Yeah.
And, my parents, they don't like to sit around. They like to do stuff. And when they're here for a couple weeks, my dad helped me with plating all the wood for the barn, which was a huge help. I don't think I could have done any of that on my own. And if we had to hire someone, it would have cost a lot of money to do that. And then my mom actually helped with something more tedious, which is like the deck. Every screw needs a little plug.
Mm-hmm.
So she helped out with that to the point where I just had to finish it, maybe like 3%.
Yeah.
She did most of the work. So thank you for that. And, that would have been one of those tasks that you would just keep pushing off into the future, and then it doesn't get done, and you always look at the deck not being finished.
It was during, I think, a really hot part of the day, though, because your mom was trying to get out there during the morning hours or the afternoon, and she broke it up, which I think really worked for her.
Yeah,
So
it's a great little task.
The deck, okay, if you did that in 2023, we got a little bit done in 2024. I would say it's about 95 to 98% finished because we still have to finish the lower deck, which is where the new bedroom ensuite is going to walk out onto. And we're probably going to have to put some drainage, and I think that's going to be a next year project, I would imagine.
Yeah, so to break up some of the work from the house, we did a lot. We put in a window downstairs in that bedroom.
Yeah.
We took a lot of the concrete out that was in our way for like a radiant floor section of the bathroom. There's a lot of framing got done. I insulated the basement down there.
Yeah, which you've vacillated back and forth about whether you wanted to do that or not.
Well, insulating basements from the inside is really tricky because ideally it's done from the outside. So I did a lot of research, and it's hard sometimes because you hear all these different opinions on the internet, and I just cross-referenced everything I could find from experts to who built, from products that exist that use a similar type of foam, from just YouTube videos and stuff like that, and opinions on the internet, and just cross-reference everything, and then kind of came to the conclusion that it should be fine. Our basement's actually very solid.
It's very solid,
there's
very
no
dry.
cracks. But
Yeah.
30 years from now,
Yeah.
what is it going to look like? Is the water going to be able to get in or not?
We also mouse-proof the entire house.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's big on Saunders' agenda.
It's just sad. Like, mice can just destroy a structure. Like, and the amount of just gross ass mouse stuff that I found in that ceiling. You can imagine like ripping down insulation bats that are just full of dead mice and just feces and just pissed on. It's just gross. It's probably the grossest
He found
thing.
a lot of like dead carcasses like in between the wall frames.
A mouse would be walking in the ceiling and it would fall into a gap and it wouldn't be able to get out, and it just sits there and it dies, and it's just like this layers of just dead mice. It's just really gross. I'd say that plus like the old toilet that was down there.
Yeah,
it has it had like a basin where it grinds up the feces, and it's so nasty.
And we had to remove that and move it down. It was so heavy. And we were
we were like, what are we gonna do with this tank?
And we never really
poop?
used it, so we were removing someone else's feces.
Yeah.
Not that it makes it any better.
And it's just sitting in there for a long time. We had to put it in the septic tank.
Yeah.
So, and the septic tank was far away.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's absolutely nasty. But, once those tasks are done, now you have a clean start, and we want to keep the mice out because, like, I am obsessed with this YouTube channel, Twin Home Experts.
Mm-hmm.
They are absolutely the best in the industry.
They used to be plumbers, and now they get mice and rats out of people's homes.
Yeah, you can learn so much from watching their videos, and they are the best. I completely agree with how they approach, sealing everything up. So, we want to have sheds here. We want to have homes here that don't have mice and critters living in them. So setting everything up, to make sure that even if they get in, that they still have limited access. And where they were getting in is actually what happened in our house here is I had it completely mouse-proofed, but they were still getting in. And I was wondering why. And what happened is that the electrical panel was attached to a piece of plywood that was put in before they poured the slab. So what happened is that behind the plywood was like a little bit of space that was exposed to the dirt. And I think they were just they may have burrowed from outside, underneath our foundation wall, coming up. And I end up cutting that plywood, filling that gap with concrete, and after that,
yeah, we
no
use
more
some
mice.
Special kind of like putty or something, right?
Well, they make those little buckets. No, I actually use normal concrete because
Okay.
it was quite a large hole.
Okay.
But they do have these little buckets where you can mix some water and then it will kind of expand and harden really quickly. It's for repairs and
Well,
stuff.
we haven't had any mouse incursions since that time, and it's been 8 months. So I think we, fingers crossed, I think we got them. So there's a lot more that we have to do, and that's going to probably be our big 2025 project. One other thing that coincided with your parents, though, is that even though we finished the Meadow house, I believe it was in November of 2023, we kind of pretty much finished it, but there were just these little things like we had to actually redo some of the plumbing, and we added a softener in the Meadow house in preparation for your parents coming to stay for a few
yeah,
weeks.
we did that as well.
Yeah, so then it was officially the
Yeah.
Meadow house was finished.
See, the plumbing in the Meadow house was done, but it wasn't done right.
Right.
Every time you would turn on the water, you would smell sulfur. The toilet would get orange.
Yes.
What was that again? It was
magnesium.
magnesium
and maybe a little iron, but I think it was primarily magnesium.
yes. And the problem is we in order to make more space in the bathroom there, we took our pressure tank and moved it to the barn because those buildings are connected.
That was recommended to us by the plumber who had put the plumbing in the first place in that space.
But the problem is you get weird pressure differences because as soon as the pump kicks on, like there's a bit of this motion within the pipes as like the pump could really increase the pressure, but until like it takes a little bit of time before that pressure to actually reach the tank if it's like over 100 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd get these fluctuations where the pump kicks on because it's not enough pressure, and then it would shut off because there is too much pressure, and then it would kick back on. It's like this weird wave.
And the hot water would shut off.
The hot water was also, I think that was actually a breaker.
Oh, okay.
It tripped the breaker constantly.
We were trying to troubleshoot it though, back and forth.
Yeah.
And it was like
So the
almost
problem that we
impossible.
ended up with, we had a 2x2 closet that we needed to fit a 30-gallon water heater in,
Yeah.
a water softener, a pre-filter, a pressure tank, all the internet equipment. Like it's basically the entire utility room of a house in a 2x2 foot space.
And Aaron, who is our plumber, is like, this is not going to fit. But like Sonder
Yeah.
came in with like this 3D model and said,
Well,
this is how it's going to fit.
I think we found a softener that's made for like RVs, and it has like a tiny 10x10 tank and a
Yeah.
tiny 10x10 salt.
What's the name of the company?
It's called U.S. Water.
U.S. Water.
US Water Systems.
It's primarily U.S. made. We actually, a lot of the Meadow House, the fixtures and appliances and everything, a lot of what we got there is actually made in the USA, which we think is really cool. But they have been great, and they have excellent customer service.
Yes, they have. So U.S. Water is what we also used for this. And what I like about them is that this house that we bought, it came with Culligan and their water softener. And when I call Culligan, it's like a magic box, right? It's like, and if I were like really old and I didn't know anything about water, that's what I want. I want a service to come to my house and like do everything for me,
Right.
make sure it works, and you know that experience it just didn't work for us. The approach that we're taking, where we're like in control of everything and we're like making sure it all like
They
is
charged
optimized.
us just to come and
it's
change
like
the salt.
You'd get charged for changing salt, but
Yeah.
it's just as easy to drive to the hardware store and grab a couple bags of salt and refill it.
Yeah.
It's
But
like
we were
10
using
times
their
cheaper.
tank, and so they were charging us for
Well,
their tank.
so they were offered to sell us the tank, but for the same price, we were able to get an entire.
And it was like already 15 years old, right?
And it was already 15 years old,
Yeah.
so it was a really bad deal. So we ended up going with U.S. Water Systems. And what I like most about them is that the CEO from the company is really passionate about water systems, and he has these training videos online. It's bad audio, but you could still hear it. He just explains like everything, how to take hard water and get it to a point where it's soft water. Everything you need to know about reverse osmosis, how it works, what kind of not chemicals, but like what kind of minerals are in the water.
Yeah.
And it's just really clear and explained, and it allows you to understand what's actually going on. Like this mystery box kind of opens up and you can understand what the thing is doing. And I like that a lot because if we ever need to fix it or we need to come up with a different solution, we know what to do.
And we had a situation where I think when Aaron was putting in the plumbing, he actually maybe cracked something within it. And
Well, a
then
part was broken.
A part was broken,
Yeah.
and they sent us the new part.
They send us new equipment. They send us new resin
Yeah.
beads, and they would be a company that like obviously like some people use UV lights to kill bacteria
Mm-hmm.
in their water. Now, if you have a really contaminated well, I would definitely recommend installing that.
Yeah,
but
if you're around farmland.
Yeah.
But
our
cows
well
are pooping
is
everywhere.
like we might not even have bacteria in our water. So instead of putting a UV light in that is very expensive every year, you have to replace the bulb because the thing is always on. you know, it's a lot of money to replace that every year. Instead, they recommended us these cheaper filters that you just put in where your drinking water is. Because it doesn't really matter if your water that you flush your toilet with it has a little bit of bacteria in it. So they were really honest with like, here's what you actually need, and I really appreciate that. So the knowledge, honesty, most stuff was made in the United States, except from some parts that they couldn't find here or source here. And it's just, I like the company. So.
Yeah, so we're gonna throw a shout out to them because they were just really marvelous and wonderful, and we wanna see places like that, especially if they're based in the USA, be supported. And you should support them too, even though this is not sponsored by them. So yeah, I would say, just to kind of recap it, the barn renovation was probably the biggest thing. You still have a lot to do in your workshop, but I think it's primed and ready for you to work on that in 2025. But you painted a wall in your workshop, you got to clean up some of the barn.
Yeah, I need to get it ready for electric to be installed.
Right.
And that's the next step. And without the walls painted, you can't really, I mean, you can install it, but then you'll have to take all the cover plates off again, all the lights. So it's best to paint it first, then the electric can go in, and then I gotta work on the floors, and then I can build my office space, basically, which is gonna be a lot of work, but at least the outside windows are all painted.
The shell of it is basically
the shell of it
finished.
is done on the outside, which is great because then, you know, over the winter it could stay nice and warm.
I mean, the point of doing that workshop, which was, I think, started in 2023, is so that he could build all the cabinetry, custom cabinetry and everything. So you could still do that there. It's just not like set up. You know, you're probably still looking for your tools and like, where the heck is this and the heck is that?
Yeah, it's a crucial thing to have ready. Like at some point, we're gonna get back to working on this. But at some point I have to finish the shop to a point where I can actually start making cabinets in there and furniture.
And we already know that our electrician is really hard to schedule. So part of the reason why we are kind of pushing off the electricity until maybe the last moments is because we want to bundle it. We need to do the electricity in the barn, in his workshop, up here still, and also in the chicken coop, which right now...
Yeah, chicken coop needs to be hooked up.
It's called a chicken coop, but right now I have 4 of my diamond doves floating around in there. But we have a little heater because, you know, we have an outdoor extension cord right now, which seems to work pretty well, but if we're like traveling and away, we didn't really want to have the extension cord out. We'd rather have like built-in electricity.
And this is a beefy cord. It's a cord made for outside, and it is rated for twice the amount of electricity.
And rated for cold temperatures.
And also rated for cold temperatures.
Yeah.
Below a certain amount.
We got this cool. I mean, it works wonders. I mean, but the coop is insulated. I mean, it used to be a nursery office, but the coop is insulated, so it's not. It really retains heat very well. We haven't had too many cold nights, but we have had like above freezing temperatures. And we got another system. I can't remember the name of that company either.
Well, heating...
Envy Heating, and that's also made in the USA.
Yeah, so heating that coop is very tricky because anything you get, like, it's the same with the wood shop. If I use the mini split unit on the wall, you'd get air. You basically get hot air that's getting blown in. And with birds or with sawdust in the space, it's just not ideal.
No.
Then you get to, what about a wood stove? With wood stove, that's not really a good idea either, with a bunch of birds flying around, having an open fire. Yeah, land on the stove. They burn their little feet off. Or then what about propane? Again, it's also hot air that's being blown into the space, and there's a lot of dust and just feathers that can get trapped in like the heating element. So we were looking for kind of a heating method where it's just kind of static and there's no moving parts too much. So we ended up with like an electric heater, and it's just basically... It's
a plug-in, and it's very thin. It's like maybe
It's a 1,000-watt heater.
1,000-watt heater. It costs about, what did we figure?
$200 maybe? I don't know.
It costed a little bit, but it's like, how much is it a day to heat it? It's 1 kilowatt hour.
It's 1,000 watts.
Yeah.
So it's a kilowatt hour per hour.
Yep. And we pay 25 cents.
And we pay 25 cents roughly per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So it takes for the thing to run, it's 25 cents to run it for an hour.
Yeah.
And it's not the most efficient way to heat. Like
No.
ideally, I would like to have a radiant system in there, or, it'd be really fancy, or like a mini split. But the problem is like all these other things we mentioned. And the benefit of that place is that it's actually really small. And it's mostly insulation.
It's like
we
14
only have
by 14.
3 openings on one side of the building, so there's also less possibility of draft
And
from
the
one corner to
openings
the
are
other.
on the south and the east, which is the sun in the morning and the sun.
Plus, the openings are mostly glass, which means that you're actually gonna gain a lot of heat from just that. And then on top of that, you also did the entire inside of the walls with clay, which is a lot of thermal mass. So a lot of the heat that comes in from the sun does heat up the space quite a bit. All that heat gets sort of stored in the concrete floor and in the ceiling and in the walls. And when you walk in there on a cold day, it's actually really decent in there.
Yeah.
And the heater probably has to do a lot less than if it were like a normal home.
Now, you may ask, well, why do you even have a heater if it's going to be a chicken coop? And the reality is that it's just not a chicken coop right now. You wouldn't need a heater for the chickens. Maybe on a super cold day, I could put it on and it would be a treat
Right.
for them. But this is kind of more for these diamond doves, which are desert dwelling. They're from Australia. They were rescues. They had 2 babies. We allowed them to have 2 babies, but
You allowed them to.
you convinced me.
I said, let them experience life. And then in the winter, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a project for 2025. But the
That's
only
another
reason,
point. It's like, when the chickens are in there, you don't really need heat. So, it's not really worth it to install a mini split, because then
No.
you would invest a lot of money in that and then you don't really use it.
it does freeze in the coop though, and if I even had it, because we have a thing on it that turns it off at a certain temperature. If I had
It's
it,
called thermostat. Yeah.
a thermostat, sorry, yeah.
It sounds really fancy, but like
Thank you,
it is.
Sander. But no, my point of that is that if I just have it above like at 40 degrees, I keep the temperature at 40 degrees during the coldest part of the days, and it turns off if it becomes 41. At least I'll never have to go in there and
Yeah.
hit the ice off of the water. So that's perfect.
Yeah, you could just leave it just above freezing.
Yeah,
in there.
and it'll barely
You
barely
probably
have to
barely use it.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing you might want to get is a little bit of a fan, maybe like a computer fan, or like a really large computer fan. It just helps to spread the hot air around.
I guess, but it's such a small
again,
room,
it's such a
and
dusty,
I walked in
dusty
there.
situation.
I walked in there. I was like, it was like 78 degrees because we have another little thermometer there, and I was like, wow, this is really hot. Of course, it was like during the hot part of the day, but I don't know if we had any other renovations that we did because the barn was such a beast in 2024.
You know what? We also worked on our fence.
Yeah, but that's getting into landscape. But
Okay.
we could actually
continue.
move into that because we did work on the fence. I think our goal was to work on certain sides of the fence. We got the whole eastern side completed, and we now have the rest of the fence that we are going to punt until 2020.
Yeah. So this deer fence is a project because ideally we'd like to keep the deer out. We have a fence from the previous owner, and that fence is maybe like 20 years old by now.
I think it depends on the side of it because
Yeah.
I think it ranges anywhere from 10
Yeah,
to
it
30.
was extended a couple times.
Yeah.
Now the issue is that, we already took care of like the front side of our fence, basically the east side.
And part of the north.
Yes. So then what's happening now is that the metal fabric that's on our fence is starting to rust, and it's welded wire. It's kind of a weak fence. And what's happening is that the deer, if they really want to, they can just choose a spot and they'll bust right through it. Doesn't even have to be a corner. It could just be wherever they like. And so I'd say the first thing they'll try to do is crawl underneath, which they could probably do in some places because the fence is weak enough. Then they'll try to bust through it. Then they might hop over it. And
We do have some
those
places
are kind
that are-
of like
We put up a trident fence and it's like 6 feet tall. It's like deer will
plastic fence, yeah.
Yeah, deer will soar over the 6 feet. And it did keep them out for a good part of the year.
Yes, because it's confusing and it's new for them.
Yeah.
But eventually they'll figure it out. And that one they can also bust through. I think
Yeah.
this is really how they go. They go try to crawl under it. If they really can't figure that out, they'll go try to bust through it, which is, I've seen it hundreds of times. Then, if they can't figure that out, then they'll jump over it. And then, I don't know, after that, and so the fence that we're putting in is a much stronger,
You want a woven wire
yeah,
fence.
it's a woven wire fence. So instead of welding the two things that come together, you put a big knot in it, and it makes it so much stronger. And that one, you can't crawl underneath because it doesn't really flex. You can't bust through it because you can't go through it. And then you can jump over it, but hopefully if we install it 8 foot tall and we put a secondary fence that's 4 feet, 3 feet away from it, that kind of discourages them to get close, that should prevent them from getting in because they are really bad at seeing depth. And having 2 fences, it should be a better way to keep them out. So that's like another
So one of the
big
things
project we started.
that we are starting at this time too is we are in preparation for finishing the rest of the fence, and the things that we're working on is identifying any of the trees that could potentially fall on the fence, either the current one that we had replaced or the future one. So we had our friend Jason come over and he did some short work on cutting down quite a bit of trees. We had still a lot of ash, even though he took out a bunch
There's
of ash.
some really big ash.
Really
in
big
there,
ones,
like,
which is really dangerous. So, cutting trees of this size is such a dangerous business. And actually, he was here and he was wearing his helmet and everything, and he was cutting a tree, and the tree next to him, like a big branch, like really came down and hit him right on the head. And at that length, like how far above
Yeah,
him, it's a real hit.
it destroyed his helmet, I think.
Destroyed his helmet, knocked off like
Yeah.
and he had to go, and he said once you get a hit on the helmet like that, he's like, you got to go and get another helmet because there's all these like micro breaks within the helmet. So that's, I guess, a good safety tip. If something comes and hits you, make sure you have a backup helmet to use. So, those things are a little scary, especially in a forest like we have, which, hadn't been really taken care of all that well. And there's a lot of like dead limbs and dead trees. And even though it's not like an old forest, a lot of the trees are quite tall.
Yeah, it's a mess in there though. A
It's a
lot of stuff
mess.
is growing really close together. So then when you start cutting, you can't really fell a tree because it just gets stuck. So then you just try to figure out how to chop it up more to let it kind of drop to the ground. But as you do that, you're like taking other trees down, and it's just best to hire someone to do that. Because if
Yeah.
I were to go in there with my chainsaw, man, it would be really dangerous to do
Yeah.
that.
So one of the other things that we're working on this year that will be finished in preparation for the rest of the deer fence is we had assembled or dug some holes that we're going to be putting some wooden posts in. So most of the posts that we're putting in are metal posts that are powder coated in black.
Yeah, which are interesting because they are more expensive to buy, but the labor of installing them is a lot less.
Yeah, because you could just hit them down with
And we're also
machine.
in areas where it's really hard to get a machine into. So
Yeah.
normally I guess it would be easy to install wooden posts, but if you can't get a machine in there, then
Yeah.
it does become.
So we do have some wooden posts on the south side that we're going to have to set ourselves, and that will be in preparation for the fence folks to come in and then string the fence line. And we have a 6-foot fence, and then we're going to string like 3 lines of metal really taut above that. So it'll be 8 feet.
Yeah.
But we just went with that because, and we have a lot of the material ourselves. Like part of it is that we got from Deer Busters, and part of it that we bought already, thinking that we were going to do the fence ourselves in 2024. No, that didn't really work out.
Well,
We
there's
need
one
help with
part.
it.
The stretching of the fence is the hardest part.
That's the hardest part.
If you don't have equipment.
Well, and also just carrying the fence rolls. I mean,
That's
trying
what the
to-
machine does.
Yeah, just trying to get that up there and then stretching out. It's
The
impossible.
stretching the fence is the hardest part if you don't have a machine. And to get a machine that does that, I mean, you can rent one, but not really, because in order to carry that roll, you need specific equipment. And I don't know, those guys know how to do it. We have some areas where there's like, it has to go over a bit of a hill. So, you just have all these different, so we'll prepare all the posts, we'll make all the corners, and then we'll have them do the stretching. And it's 2,500 feet of fence, which is a lot of fence.
It's a lot, but it'll
So-
be the final, at least for us, like for right now, it'll be the final fixes.
Yeah, and
of-
then we also install cameras
Yes.
on the fence that in the areas that we know the deer like to come in and try to figure out how to get in. And
So we'll be
then
able to monitor
we'll
it.
be able to monitor those, and then if they do get in, we have an area behind our pond that we can kind of isolate them in. If I make a door fence on each side of the pond, so on each side of the pond there's like a little strip of land where you can walk. So if we close those doors, you're kind of stuck back there, and there's an opening in it. So we can chase them out if we need to, which I've done before with
Yeah.
like parking the UTV kind of sideways so they can't get through. And if that doesn't help, hunting season might have to be part of the plan.
Yeah, so I think this will be a real true testament. And you'll have noticed that when we did garden tours, we still have metal fences around trees and shrubs. And it's partially because we have this old antiquated fence in many areas. And as Sandra shared, they'll keep on testing the limits of the fence. And 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 will inevitably get in. And so that's my hope, is that once we finish that, we'll at least keep them out for a year. We'll see. But we had no tulips in the 80,000 bulb lawn that we had planted. Well, there was a few, but I think what happened is that deer lips wrapped around them and we just had no tulipus.
Well, we're confident that once the fence is fixed, we know that we can keep them out, because we have been successful in keeping them out for a while.
Yeah.
Even in the spring. But eventually they'll figure it out again. So the problem is like, if this is such an ongoing thing where you're never able to once you get into another project and all of a sudden there's a deer again, now you have to work your entire morning trying to get that deer out. And it's just not sustainable.
No.
It's just super, and at some point you're just gonna let it go.
Yeah, so we'll see, we'll see. Back into the landscape thing, one of the things that we had finished that took about a year for us to kill out some of the grass in the meadow just in front of the Meadow house. And I was really looking forward to that project because it was really quite weedy. It had one type of invasive grass in that area, and there's something about sitting in the Meadow house on the rocking chair and looking out into the meadow and having a really nice landscape. So this fall, we basically lifted up some of that black landscape fabric, and we did quite a bit of seeding and plugs. Actually, I was just down there because I planted some more bare roots down there. And I think that's looking good. We're killing the back of that area now behind it. I don't think we'll do too much else with it. We'll probably kill that area, plant it in 2025. That'll be a 2025 project. In that area as well, we kind of kept down some of the grass and we planted some trees in that area. So hopefully they'll get nice and big, and that will provide a little bit of depth perception. So you could look into the meadow, you could see some trees with some beautiful flowers and leaves, that type of thing. So really just creating a picturesque landscape around the Meadow house. And something that was not planned, which I really wanted to do, has been on my mind for a while, is putting in that 1/8 acre area in, I call it the backyard, but it's really the front yard of the Meadow house. And we did all those beautiful shapes. One thing that we didn't plan for is putting the garden edging. We found some really good garden edging from Yard Edge.
The grass just keeps, even here, like in the garden beds, the grass just keeps crawling in there.
Yep.
So we had to install that, otherwise you'd just be forever fighting that.
Yeah, and it provides a really nice barrier. Even though grass and grass seeds may still get in there, it provides a nice barrier and shape, so you know where you could string trim or mow.
Yeah, because the shape would get lost.
The shape gets lost and
like,
muddy, or it gets muddied.
It?
Yeah.
Like, even here, it's like gonna be hard to. We have edging for this area here too, but
we didn't get around to it. We bought it, but
the
we
grass
didn't get
is so
around to
tall that you can't really see the shapes well. So we need to wait till after winter.
Although when you do like a drone shot and you fly above, it still looks like kind of the general shape. But we want to get
it's there, but
crisp edging.
You can see it from the ground.
I thought that was a great project. We wouldn't have gotten to it if it weren't for Espoma, because they had a number of soil seconds and they needed to get rid of them. They were basically bags that had been opened or sitting out too long. I mean, it would have costed us probably a couple thousand at least dollars to bring in soil from somewhere else in order to be able to build those beds up. So we were very fortunate to just put that together. Now, all the gardens down there are not quite finished, but this will be a great start, and we'll see how much they grow like next year. So we have to have patience for that. Another thing that we started to do this year is that we ended up, last year we ended up putting a lot of bird boxes. We had a floating duck house. We put up new bird boxes for like wood ducks and mergansers. And I don't know if they ended up using any of those boxes. We have basically the floating duck house became Turtle Island, but we also put them in a little late because when I went to go look into one of the old duck boxes that I wanted to take down, there were already eggs in there. And in fact, I checked on them. There was no eggs left in the box. So I don't know
Something
what happened.
ate it.
Either something ate it or I don't know.
Yeah, I think we were too late.
Yeah, we were too late. So we need to get out there in February. You know, you just have to have the motivation to basically put on your galoshes or your big
Yeah.
your big water boots and you go out there and you just move it in.
But the way we done it, I think is perfect because the duck boxes are in the water.
Yeah.
So and they're on a metal post, so it makes it really hard for predators to get in there.
A predator can't crawl up a metal post.
And we've had wood ducks here for 2 times now.
And mergansers.
And mergansers.
Yeah.
And their box would just get raided.
We actually just saw a pied-billed grebe in our pond, and I think it's, you know, it's obviously migration season and the Kennedy geese are honking up a storm and everybody's moving and shifting, but we had a merganser, female merganser, and pied-billed grebe, which is threatened in this state. So it was really nice to see some of those water birds moving in. We still haven't had like our buffleheads or ringneck ducks. That we usually see them in the beginning part of the migration and the end part of the migration, so we'll have to keep our eyes out for that. The other thing that we started to do, which was just so fortuitous, is that we had a gentleman, Mark, come over who had studied with Brian Danforth's lab, and he's been documenting some of our bee pollinators. And we did find a couple interesting bees that are kind of on the decline in New York State. And I'd like to do more of that throughout the season. We brought in one of our friends, Robert Wesley, who's one of the great naturalists here in the Finger Lakes. And we started also documenting some of the native plants and non-native plants that he's seeing around here within the greater landscape. Because even though I'm keeping a really good tally of the plants that I'm planting within the gardenscapes and within, like, let's say the Meadow area, and I have like a whole spreadsheet on what we're planting, he's finding things that were already in the landscape, and I could cross-reference with whether I had like planted that in the meadow or the around Half Lake or anything along that nature. So that's really good to have like a fuller view, I think, of what we're working with. I would have loved to get him out sooner rather than later, but it just didn't work out that way. I think that, you know, whenever you're kind of managing a homestead, there's a zillion things that you'd want to do, but I'm just really happy that that kind of came to fruition. And we got in touch with Mark because some of the folks, he's married to somebody with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and she is the one that recommended it. And it was just fortuitous that we actually did tested some of our activities that we wanted to get around to. And the Lab of Ornithology had contacted us for an offsite, which was wonderful, like kind of a professional offsite where they came here. It was literally on the hottest day of the year. We didn't have as much of the infrastructure open to them as we wanted, but they didn't give a damn about that, which is great. So it was fun that we got to trial that.
Yeah, that was really cool because, you know, they're coming here and, you know, they're really into birds, and there's literally so many birds here. Like,
Yeah.
I sometimes think that there's more birds here than at the Lab of Ornithologists, like just because they're in the area we're at and the way you're feeding them too. So it's cool to have them use the space for, you know, getting together and figuring out new ideas for
what's the future of the Lab
Yeah.
of Ornithology? And sometimes you've got to get out of your, you know, office space and just be inspired by something else. So we hope to do more of that. And I think as we, you know, the barn wasn't even finished. They were using the barn, but it was, you know, it was like all the wood.
They're really generous because
Yeah.
I guess they were seeing what we were trying to do, and they were just like, let's just rent it out anyways, because, you know,
Yeah.
maybe in the future they'll do it again, and then it will be more finished, and eventually,
Yeah, so that was great. And then we also had a few garden tours that we had.
Yep.
You know, some of the garden clubs had come up. We sold some tickets for some of the private garden tours, like or public garden tours. And that was really nice because we invested in like a little speaker system. There's a lot of things that we gained from that. Like we now realize like we should have more places, even though I've been buying chairs and benches every time I see them, and Sandra gives me a lot of like, you know,
Well,
grief for buying them, but we know that we need more shade, more benches in certain places for folks.
yeah, we need benches that have a destination, not piled up in a barn that we don't have the space for.
We brought in
need.
all of our furniture again this year because
Yeah, well, that's, you know, that's
wanna-
also,
longevity.
it's good to put stuff inside. And when we got those big barns, we should use them. It's good to think about storage space for those things too.
That's another thing we did.
The barns. We
We
painted
painted
those.
the barns.
Ugly barns.
We painted the ugly barns that we have up here, the big metal barns. They were in this like ugly kind of golden beige color that the chicken coop still is in because we're planning on like, you know, cladding that with wood. But one thing we didn't get around to, and we weren't planning on it, was painting the barns this really beautiful dark velvety green. And we just never filmed that way because in the back they were so glaring. Now they just basically fade into the background.
Yeah, the problem is like, if I would film that direction, then you wouldn't see the garden. You would be like, what is that building? So like, we decided to just paint it all the same green. And it's a green that's like slightly more towards blue and darker so that you can have a green plant in front of it and it doesn't disappear. So even though that is not really a high priority thing, the barns are really functional. We don't want to take them away. It is an important thing for just the completed aesthetics because you're doing so much to the land. Like you're making all these gardens really beautiful and you're working on the house, making that beautiful. And it's just to have those giant barns next door that just don't participate, that's just, it's hard to see that.
We also like redid the stone in one of the barns as well because it doesn't have a fully concrete bottom, and we were getting in more of that soil that we had to store, and we're like, why don't we just clean out this entire barn,
cleaned out the whole
reorganize it?
barn.
You did a lot of the
It's
reorganization.
incredible because that thing was just stuffed full of stuff. And you always walk in and you feel like you have no more space to put stuff. We cleaned it all out. We parked more stuff in there.
Yeah.
And now we have 2/3 of it still empty to be filled up. So
Yeah.
it's like, where did all this crap go? Like
Yeah.
a lot of that was also stones that we've gotten from our neighbors that we're now going to use in those stone garden there. So,
Yes, in the rock garden down, and that's a 2025 project, which we'll talk about in another video. But yeah, I think even though it feels like we didn't accomplish as much, I think, as like the year before, it's just because some of the projects are a lot bigger.
Yeah,
and
it really
unwieldy.
surprised me how long that barn took. And I think the two things that held me up were that it's just so much of the same thing, the wooden siding. It was easy to figure it out. Once you figure it out, it's like, okay, just do that for like 200 feet. So, and then all the doors trim, all the garage door trim, window trim. Trim takes a long time, doing it properly, flashing everything so the water doesn't mess with it. Painting all the windows, getting all the hardware to work. Some of the windows weren't like opening properly, so I had to grab hardware from another window.
Just the doors alone were just so
I think how many doors
challenging.
were there in there? 16 doors total or
16
something?
doors. It's the new, basically all the doors
Three,
that came
four,
from,
five,
that we
six.
upcycled from this building, we are using down in the barn. And it looks great because like he's refinished them, painted them, added these like, that cool feature on the bottom that keeps it airtight. Like, I don't even know what that is called. It's
Yeah,
like
there's
a flap,
this really cool...
like a rubber flap that comes down.
So there's this really cool thing, because I don't want to have a door, I want to have a smooth transition from outside to inside in the barn. And I don't want to have one of those door things, I don't even know what you call them.
Yeah, the
raised part inside the door opening.
I can't think of the name
The door
of it.
sill? I don't know. It's like kind of a window sill of the door.
Yeah, I know.
Anyways, there's this mechanism that's for commercial use where you have a little groove in the bottom of the door and there's a pin that sticks out. As soon as the door closes, the pin gets pushed in and it drops.
It's pretty cool. We'll provide a link to it.
It drops this rubber piece on the
piece.
floor that
Yeah.
seals the bottom and it's just,
Yeah, it's pretty
it's
cool.
awesome. That way the cold air, bugs
There's a
don't
lot
get
of
in.
cool little contraptions.
Yeah.
I mean, but this is the big overall view of like 2024. So we hope that, gives you a sense of like what you can accomplish in a year. And just like a bee flying through. Flowers are that way. Yeah, so we'll do another video on what we're planning on doing for 2025, but thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate all of you, and for those of you who have subscribed or become members of this channel, we really appreciate you. It really helps us, do the stuff that we're doing here, because it's kind of like a thing that we're doing on the side. But yeah, we really appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.